Today's video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. Welcome to my library floor, which is where I sit when I am overwhelmed and just a little bit frustrated with everything, because that's how we're feeling today, is a little bit of sadness, a little bit of frustration, but rather than touching grass, I'm going to touch books, which is, I have two piles of books here that have not been organised, and I'm going to do that whilst chatting about everything, because I feel like I'm really not in a space to do another scripted video right now, because how am I meant to follow on from that? Really. I have been sincerely really appreciating a lot of the nuanced discussions, particularly around this launch of the Odyssey film and how people are responding to it, and it's given me a lot of food for thought in terms of, from a perspective of someone in academia who talks about reception studies in particular. There's a lot for me to talk about, and I've definitely written down a few papers, ideas for conferences from all of this, so it has been really fruitful in that regard, but it has also made me a tad sad in many other ways. I suppose it's taken me back to when I started classics and the gatekeeping and prejudices that were there, and I knew they were there, but I was sort of hoping, maybe I was naive, I can't really undo centuries worth of gatekeeping in a matter of a decade or so, but still it makes me sad to see that things are still a little bit puritanical and gatekeepery as they were back when I started studying classics. So I thought I'd talk about it for funsies whilst also going through these books. And I'll show them on the screen whilst I'm going. So these are all secondhand books that I have purchased over the past year, and I just haven't organised them. I think a couple of them are brand new releases, so they are not secondhand. I think the ones on the top. But aside from that, all the rest are secondhand, the vast majority, because vintage is dangerous. Vinted is a really dangerous website for me to be on, and I shouldn't be allowed on it, because every time I go on there to sell a book, I always end up buying 7 more. So this has happened. So a couple of new books I definitely had, I think, on pre-order for these to come out in paperback. The first one was And How Have You Been, which is a collection of short stories by a Portuguese writer called Maria de Carvalho. And then we also have the original by Nell Stevens, which I believe is a Victorian retelling of a painter and a lost cousin at sea, and the mysterious nature of, is this person actually their cousin? I assume. So these are definitely brand new, as is The History of Bookshops, translated from French, and it's by Jean-Yves Mollier, which is a non-fiction text of it. And then we have some other kind of newer books, in my opinion. I've got The Oldest Bitch Alive by Morgan Day, A Short Stay in Hell by Stephen Peck, and also these are just funny because I saw these in a charity shop and I was like, I need to talk about these. It's How to Talk About Books You Haven't Read, and there's another one of a very similar title, How to Really Talk About Books You Haven't Read, but they're by complete different authors. But yeah, I've been feeling a bit down about the gatekeepery nature of classics, and I was hoping I was part of a movement that was changing that perception, or rather trying to encourage people into it. I feel narratives have just slipped back. Ironically, by people who I don't think really even have studied the classics. It seems to be more from outsider narratives about what the classics should mean and who should have access to them. But I get the impression, based on how people are talking about it, that they may not even have studied it or read the text that they're defending so hard, because a lot of them seem to have a misunderstanding of how these texts are, which is kind of just interesting. But also it took me right back to school, because when I was first wanting to apply, so I studied classics at university as an undergraduate alongside English literature. And I did my master's in English literature, and then I'm doing PhD in classics. So I kind of went between the subjects, because I specialise primarily in classical reception and looking at how classics exists within English literature. So I kind of teeter between the two subjects, and I always sort of have. But when I was first wanting to apply for that, I remember very distinctively being in my deputy headmaster's office for some reason, but my English literature teacher was there. Don't know why we were having this meeting there. But her telling me that I would humiliate myself if I even attempted to apply for classics at university. And basically just giving this whole spiel about how I wasn't educated enough, I don't know the ancient languages, I've never studied it, so I'd look like a fool by applying. And even if I did get into university by sheer luck, then I'd humiliate myself further. Now, obviously that has dated really badly because I'm doing my PhD in that subject, and it got me thinking at the time, that's not fair. I didn't get to study the classics at school. I never got the option to study it. I mean, it's very different across Europe, particularly in like Italy and Greece, but in the UK specifically, studying classics or ancient languages in any shape or form tend to be reserved to posh areas or posh schools, of which I didn't go to either. So I didn't get the opportunity. None of my schools offered those as subjects. So it felt immediately like I wasn't allowed into the subject. And that application doesn't apply elsewhere. It's something that they talk about quite strongly. Like you can't, you'll humiliate yourself if you do that. But other subjects at university, the vast majority are not studied at school. Like very few schools offer law, but lots of people go to study law at university. Very few schools offer engineering, but a lot of people go in to study engineering at university. They don't have the same narrative for these subjects that are more advanced than what people have done at school, or even in a complete new subject, or even certain languages. You know, a lot of people who study French at school apply for French and another language, so like French and Portuguese, or French and Japanese at university, and they're learning a new subject at university because they're interested in languages and developing that. But for classics, for some reason, you're told not to bother because you didn't get taught it, which is just really weird and shows you how high up a lot of people put classics. It's almost like on a different level. And I suppose that is cultural baggage that has been left over from centuries of elitism around the subject, because you can't deny that there is. You know, only the elites, particularly in the UK, learned or knew ancient Greek or Latin, and the texts. Obviously, the Bible was translated into Latin, and only certain few people could read it, and therefore anyone who was listening to it or hearing someone translate it in a church had just had to take people's word for it because they couldn't read the Bible themselves. So there's a lot of elitism and gatekeeping about who can access this knowledge, which clearly still has cultural baggage today. But before we go any further, I'd like to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, which is Squarespace. So whether you are just starting out or managing a growing brand, Squarespace makes it so easy for you to create a beautiful website, engage with your audience, and sell anything from products to content to time, all in one place and all on your terms. I've gone through so many iterations online with my online persona and changing career courses, and Squarespace has seen all sides of my online evolution. And in the future, I really want to look at starting my own foundation courses, to foundations to literature, and all the other parts of like ancient history and things like that. And I can do that on my Squarespace website because it allows me to create members-only content, whether that's blogs or videos or courses. And purchases on my website can be anything from a one-time purchase, like a merch item, to subscription access to like courses and memberships. And then when it comes to evolving my business, I can make smarter business decisions with Squarespace's intuitive analytics tools, which are built into the system, which allows me to analyze my traffic, what's doing well, what's not doing well, where to focus my engagement, and so on. And Squarespace allows me to keep track of my revenue, whether that's through bookings or merchandise sales. And again, all on one platform, so I can keep on top of my business from all angles, whether that's analytics and growing or my sales. So if you are interested, check out squarespace.com for a free trial. And then when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/lady of the library to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. I mean, you see it even in like comment sections by people who also don't meet that criteria. They basically perpetuate this idea that you either read Homer in ancient Greek or you have never read Homer at all, which again isn't a principle applied anywhere else. Like no one says you haven't read Dostoevsky unless you read it in Russian. No one says you haven't read Dumas unless you read it in French. There's ridiculous standards of like how important the rarity of a text is, when I still think across languages, you know, you're never going to get the full experience when it comes to reading something in translation, but you can still love a text. But they seem to hold ancient texts in a different standard, when in reality, most people haven't read it in the ancient language. And that goes across lecturers in my department. Like there are lecturers, I'm friends with a lecturer who doesn't read ancient Greek or Latin. I've got another lecturer in the department who doesn't read Latin, only ancient Greek. That's just how it is. Everyone has different skill sets and you kind of bounce off each other. And that's accepted in other subjects, but for some reason it's not accepted in classics. Like an English literature person is accepted as a PhD student if they don't read like Old English or they don't specialize in Shakespeare. That's completely valid. But in the classics, you have to like prove your purity and your validity to be there. Otherwise, you're a fraud and you're not welcome here. Which isn't the case actually in the department, but it seems to be something projected onto the field of academia by people who don't study it. I never met this attitude within academia. Like it seems to be something that's perpetuated outside of academia, which is really interesting. But I think the problem there is, because it perpetuates itself outside of academia, it turns more people away from sincerely going into the subject, because they don't want to subject themselves to that kind of prejudice or subject themselves to that kind of culture, which in reality in academia, that's not the culture. Like maybe in like elite schools elsewhere, but the classics people that I know are lovely. Like they are such lovely people and warm and welcoming and so willing to help each other out all the time, because some of them know, like, oh, you don't translate ancient Greek, I'll translate that thing for you and I'll help you with your project. Like it's such a wonderful community where we all help each other out. Or I'll say, oh, I know more about that narrative structure and you haven't got that, I'll send you papers on that narrative structure because I've been in that field. Like everyone shares their knowledge, and it's such a wonderful, vibrant community because everyone realizes everyone's got different skill sets, and you like rely on that. You all share it to make a stronger network of research. But from outsiders, people don't see that, and they just think one person who studies classics should be up here in terms of everything, which isn't the reality. And I think maybe it makes them like admire the subject more, and say, well, only like certain intellectuals study this subject because they have to meet this ridiculously high criteria, which isn't expected on any other subject. Like it's really strange being on this side, listening to how people perceive the subject on the outside. But then that makes me sad because I know from my perspective, it turns a lot of people away. So when I, had the conversation with my English teacher almost like 16 years ago, I didn't apply for the subject because I was like, oh, she's right. I'm not good enough. I'm not going to be intelligent enough. I don't know the subject. So I didn't apply. And then it was only a year out of school and I'm working and I'm retaking my exams. And I decided, you know what? Sold her. I'm going to apply for it anyway. And the second time around I did, and I got in, and I wouldn't be doing a PhD in the subject had I not done that. But when I applied, I had no idea that's how I would end up. Like I had no ambitions of studying classics as a PhD student. Like it wasn't something I was really like adamant with. It was more I wanted to study classics because I wanted to understand Shakespeare better, because that was my main passion in life. And I knew having an understanding of classics would really help me, and it did. It just so happens that now I'm more interested in classical influence throughout all of literature and not just Shakespeare, and particularly in modern literature, which is my speciality now. And a lot of people don't have that speciality in the classics department, but it's important for the field. It's just really interesting, but it makes me sad because seeing this quite a lot of hostility, a lot of aggression, not just aimed towards me, but anyone who didn't meet this criteria by these other people who I doubt again meet their own criteria, it sort of puts people off exploring the subject. And I don't want to be part of a system that does that. I hope I do the complete opposite and be like, no, you can study the subject, because it's not as scary as a lot of people present it as. I always think that demonstrates people who have never studied classics or even read classics compared to people who have. Because the only people I know who kind of put people off and go, oh, it's really scary, it's really hard, tend to be people who almost like don't want you to read it because they have never read it themselves and they've been too scared to read it. So it's almost like crabs in the bucket kind of attitude. Whereas the classicists I know are like, oh, hell yeah, read this, or read this translation. Like they have no qualms recommending text to other people because they see everyone as capable of reading a book, particularly in translation, because that's the beauty of translation. Like, heaven forbid we all had to be translators. None of us would get anything done. But the rest of us can, thankfully, like explore our own fields thanks to the hard work of translators who have just specialized in translation, and they get to reap the benefits of other people building upon their knowledge and expanding out and reading other not more interesting, I shouldn't say that, but other interesting fields in other areas, like more varied discussions where they just had to focus on one thing, and then they can see the benefits of their translation being employed by other academics who don't have the time for translation, or it's not their priority, or don't even have the language skills. Like they can employ their translation to build upon the classics department and build a greater, stronger field because they have time to spend elsewhere. So I don't see how that's detrimental. I see that as wonderful. And yeah, I think that's what made me sad, is that people have this very archaic, puritanical look at the classics department or the classics world in general, and almost shame themselves out of entering it, as well as shaming others, like crabs in the bucket. Like, if I can't study it, you can't study it either, which is ridiculous. And now looking back on it, again, 16 years later, seeing how against my interest my English teacher was really upset me. And it still upsets me. It kind of angers me that that's the school system. And like, thank goodness I had the attitude to be like, well, sod you. You know, I'm a first generation student. None of my family went to university. I get to go and I get to study whatever the hell I want because not like I have any options anyway. So I bought this secondhand. I was really interested with this Gore Vidal selected essays because the photograph online showed you it was signed by him. And I was like, it's signed by him for £3. But then I received an unsigned copy. So I feel like I was ripped off here. I mean, it's not ripped off. I was lied to. I was lied to by the people at, what you call it? Better World Books. Also, someone on my form asked me to talk about like modernist French poetry. So this is the reason I now have this. So thank you to the other person who requested I talk about French modernist poetry. I do take requests seriously, but I just take a long time to get round to certain subjects because I want to do them justice. I want to actually read the text. And what I like about this text I've got is it's parallel text, so I can see the French and see the English translation, which is really fun, which is really nice. It's parallel text in terms of the back of the book is entirely in French versus the front. But yeah, it's still really nice to see both languages because I love that. So I'm in two minds about the benefit of this like Odyssey discourse, because whilst I feel, you know, it's nice for people to be talking about it, I'm not confident in how many people are reading it. Like I'm not confident in how many people are going out to read the Odyssey. Additionally, I'm scared that it's creating a narrative in which is fundamentally anti-intellectual in terms of people, say, demonizing certain translations, as I've seen with the whole Emily Wilson debacle, where people have now started critiquing her translation 9 years after it was published, which I'm sure has no relation to anything about cultural wars whatsoever. But still, where I get concerned is that people have demonized her unfairly, in my opinion, still, but also refuse to engage with the text itself. Like, they have an opinion based on what other people have said, and they haven't actually engaged with her text itself, which to me is anti-intellectual, but also anti-classics. Because as part of my research and part of me being in the department and in this world, I have to engage with things all the time that I don't agree with. And that's the beauty of my subject, is because you have to see what happens in the classics world. By the time you've got to this stage in like our history of mankind, there have been so many books, discussions, translations that it becomes canonical in of itself. And the beauty of me having like 9 translations of the Odyssey is that I read all of them for themselves, and then I see what people have done with the Odyssey, how they've interpreted it, what words they have chosen, what do they emphasize with their word choices versus another person. And that's not them. I mean, obviously, manipulation is a word that, whilst it's technically accurate, demonizes, I think, like this kind of, there's an insidious nature to that terminology, which I find unjust, in terms of like, no, that's how translate. If people didn't have an agenda when they were translating, they wouldn't bother translating it because it already exists in their native language. Like, the reason I have like, I think it's 9, either 8 or 9 translations of the Odyssey isn't because there wasn't an English translation of the Odyssey. It's because other people wanted to emphasize something, or, you know, like just place their spin on it, because that's the beauty of translation, and we don't get that opportunity a lot of the time. Like, a lot of texts don't get translated multiple times. Like, there's only one English translation of like Eleanor Ferrante's books, but there are multiple translations of other books like The Master and Margarita. And it is wild how different translations of that are. Like, the first time I read The Master and Margarita, I didn't like it. And my boss at my bookshop was really surprised. And he was like, I thought you would love it. I was like, I hated it. Like, what the heck? It's so boring. And it was only like a few like days later, I went, wait, was it the book or was it the translation? And I asked him what translator he had used. And I think he just said, I don't know translator. It's just Penguin Black Classics. And I was like, okay, I didn't. So I went and read the Penguin Black Classics. I can't remember at the time now which translation that was. Night and day. Absolute night and day. Complete different book. I loved it. And it's not like the other translator, you know, purposely changed the narrative of the book. It just came across completely different. What they emphasized in their poetry just changed the novel entirely for me, and I loved it. So that's how powerful a translator is. And it's not from a malicious agenda. It's just how what their personal flair is, what their style is like, what they choose to emphasize, what they choose to not emphasize, how they want to position something based on their own linguistic, comprehension. Like, not even how they understand the language, but how they employ their own. So it's a real skill that gives you so much weight. And the same goes for texts in classics that I, don't particularly care for. I've still read them, even though they are fundamentally flawed, methodologically flawed, and sometimes blatant lies. Like, I love Robert Graves' novels, but the dude is not a good researcher. He makes stuff up all the time. His nonfiction's wild, particularly The White Goddess. Like, my God. Like, he just makes stuff up. He comes to conclusions without founding them on anything, and he just states things as facts when they're not facts. They've been disproven, but you still read Robert Graves. You don't see that as malice on his part to try and change and contort history. You just read Robert Graves as it is. The same with Joseph Campbell. I've got a lot of issues with Joseph Campbell, but I've still read a lot of his work, and I've employed some of his work, because you employ parts of it that you find interest in. You critique parts of it that you don't find very thoughtful or flawed in their statement. And that's not me demonizing Robert Graves or Joseph Campbell, but as someone who's in the department, you read all of it. So the idea that people were like, don't read her book, it's a horrible feminist take on the Odyssey, just shows that they don't want to engage in classics and the evolution of translation and classics as a whole, because there's been so many takes. Like, heaven forbid people read Ted Hughes' version of Ovid's Metamorphosis. Like, he went wild. Like, he just made up this crazy version of Ovid's Metamorphosis, but he did not get the backlash that Emily Wilson did in translating it, whereas Ted Hughes' take on it is far from a translation, and it's just wild. I've got a sociology book here. It's Irving Goffman, The Presentation of the Self in Everyday Life. I'm not sure much about it, but I was really interested. I should really read more theoretical works in my spare time. Really, I should just read a lot more broadly in my spare time. You kind of get sucked into just reading the same stuff over and over again. Whilst I'm scared of talking about deviating things, maybe I should just sod the algorithm, because the things I get fed to read about online is wild. I'm not sure if it's just because I'm a woman or what, but I am not interested. Like, I have to keep clearing my history on YouTube, because sometimes it'll automatically play a thing or a short, and the all of my algorithm is completely destroyed from that one short that automatically played, or video that automatically played. Like, why do I want to care about celebrity culture? Why is it? Because is it something that's fed to just women? Like, why am I caring? Why do I hear about celebrity culture or gossip, or what certain celebrities look like, and discussions around their bodies? It's so rotten. It's so uninteresting. It's so rotten. It's just so what? It's ridiculous. And it gets me frustrated. I'm like, well, I can't possibly talk about Blaise Pascal's Pensée, because who's going to listen to me talk about that when I eventually read it? But you know what, I'm going to read it anyway, because sod everything. I've decided to dive more into Christian philosophy. So I'm going to start here, not purely I'm not going into an interest in Christian philosophy, but I realise that I have probably intentionally avoided it, because obviously I have my biases, and I'm like, no, don't intentionally avoid things. I think where I'm suspicious of people who go oh, I'm not reading that because it's feminist claptrap, is that it sounds more like they are scared of being persuaded otherwise, whereas I'm not scared of being persuaded otherwise. I sincerely doubt a single philosophy text is going to make me change my belief on religion or my own spirituality, but it's interesting to hear from other people, whereas I feel like there's this weird perpetuated idea that if you read something feminist, you're going to be, I don't know, brainwashed into agreeing with it in some way. Whereas, again, I would say an academic approach to everything is to read things you disagree with, even more than things that you agree with, because that's the only way you can strengthen your own positions or even challenge your own biases. I thought I'll talk about Blaise Pascal, because I've seen some extracts in terms of when I'm reading essays online, and I'm like, actually, that's really beautifully put. So I shouldn't look at a book on the back and go, oh, it's a bit religious, I should pass it. I should actually read them and learn from people from different perspectives from me and see what I get out of it, even if, we don't align in things. Is it Guy or is it Guy? Is it Guy de Maupassant or Guy de Maupassant? I don't know. But short stories from him. But again, I found it secondhand on Vinted. It's amazing. what you can find on Vinted. Also, someone sold this on Vinted. It literally says advanced review copy, not for resale, which I didn't notice when I bought it because I just thought, it's an army of lovers who cannot fail. I didn't actually pay attention to the fact that it has review copy at the top at all. And then when I got it, I was like, oh, whoops. I mean, they resold it. I bought it. I didn't commit the crime. Also, this was a bargain. These 3 books have been on my wish list for ages. It's on their calculation of value, and someone sold all 3 for £9, which is insane because they're each, I think, like £8.99 or £9.99. So they look completely unread. Maybe she did read them, maybe she didn't read them, but I was very, very happy with that. So very glad. What would be my advice in this like age of kind of classical discussions? I mean, I loved it the other day. My fiance made me so happy because obviously he's been listening to me go all about the past like Odyssey discourse, and the other day he just went and he finished his book and I said, oh, can I get you another book? And he went, can I read one of your copies of the Odyssey? And my heart just like sang. I was like, yes. And I got him Fagles and he started there. And what's so interesting is that he's reading Fagles and he read the first 4 books and I went, what's your opinion? And he literally went, Telemachus is a bit of a mummy's boy, isn't he? And I was like, it's so funny that again, when I've been hearing all this like criticism of like Wilson apparently like ruining these characters, when my male fiance read only Fagles edition and his first thought was Telemachus is a bit of a mummy's boy, whinge bag. And I think some people just see what they want to see in terms of what these characters stand for, and again makes me always question whether or not they read it or not, because again when I first came to terms with the Odyssey, I remember thinking like, Telemachus is a bit of a dick, isn't he? And I was like, well, Odysseus is a bit of a dick too. And I didn't see them in this idolized way in any shape or form when I'm reading it. But I didn't have an agenda going into it. I think I was a bit shocked at how like bratty or how I perceive things. But obviously, I'm a modern person, and I'm not going to see things the same way the ancient Greeks did when they were hearing these stories. And that's what I find funny when people say about like Emily Wilson transforming it and catering it to a modern audience. I was like, I don't think you can detach our perceptions of things. And if Emily Wilson translates things as a modern person, it's how a lot of us read it anyway. Like, not everyone, but personally for me, when I read the Odyssey, I really hated Telemachus. I thought he was a whinge bag. The same with Achilles. When I read the Iliad, I was like, that's him. Like, really? Obviously, I'd only known about the Iliad, but you hear all about Achilles being this hero. He cries the majority of the Iliad. He just sits there crying with his mummy, and his mummy talks for him the vast majority of the Iliad. And as a modern person, I couldn't unsee that. Now, obviously, the ancients saw it as part of a greater epic cycle. They saw more of Achilles than we do. But as a modern person, with the extracts and the fragments that we have of these ancient texts, it's hard to not project our own expectations in terms of like how we perceive these people now. And I think it's naive to think that we can ever recapture how the ancients perceived them and what they thought, because we don't think that way. Like, you're always going to have a modern idea of how you read a text, even if it hasn't been translated. Like how we read certain things about, I don't know, Wuthering Heights. Some people see it as romantic, other people go, this is a really toxic relationship, this is a horrible, horrible people. And we can't ever project what other people, how they read it, because we're not those people. We will always have a modern lens. We will always have what we've picked up from our society, what messages we've learned about everything, from how we treat other people to how we think about like anything as like basic as like environmental issues, animal rights, how we treat like children, how we treat, women and people of color. Like, those things will be part of our innateness when it comes to our growing up. We will learn certain things at a certain age, and then when you read certain texts, how they treat, say, a person of color in that book will be shocking to us when it wasn't shocking to other people. And that's not us then ruining the text. It's just times have changed. And it's important to acknowledge that times have changed, and it's not to demonize things. We can never see things in the way that they were intended to be seen, no matter how good the translation is. And a dog has just joined the room. Hello, Sappho. I heard your little footsteps coming in. Someone's broken out of the living room. Hello, darling. Have you missed me? I've just been sitting in here for a while. I should go. She's very excited and she's not going to leave me. Sorry, darling. And thank you for listening to me ramble. I didn't really organise my books. I put them into 3 piles, and there's still this one here, and still this pile here. But I hope you are happy and healthy. And remember, books save lives, so keep reading.